Welcome, friends. I would like to now introduce Francisco Burgos, who will be speaking with us today. Francisco serves as Executive Director of Pendle Hill. Prior to joining Pendle Hill, he worked as Director of the Center for Community Initiatives at the Monteverde Institute, as the head of school at Monteverde Friends School in Monteverde, Costa Rica, and as faculty at the National Technical University of Costa Rica. He worked as Energy and Sustainable Development Specialist at the Department of Sustainable Development, DSD, of the Organization of American States. Francisco worked as Acting Program Director for the American Friends Service Committee in Baltimore and as Program Officer for Plan International in the Dominican Republic. In addition, he has worked as a teacher and trainer in Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, and Guatemala. He was a key player in the development of the National Mobile Library System of the Dominican Republic, served as facilitator for democracy and public participation processes, and is an active advocate for sustainable transportation, sustainable and cultural development. Francisco is passionate about environmental stewardship, spiritual nurturing, communal transformation, and poetry. He loves hiking, baking, and singing, and has a special interest in Latin American issues, decolonizing thoughts and praxis. He has been supporting public theology and interfaith relationship with a special focus on liberation theology, inclusion, and justice. Francisco holds a degree in clinical psychology from the National University Pedro Enriquez Ureña, a postgraduate diploma in social pedagogy from the Sevilla University and the Santo Domingo Technological Institute, an MA in sustainable development at the SIT Graduate Institute, and PhD in education from La Salle University in Costa Rica. Also, he completed graduate training and courses in the areas of energy management, philosophy, and theology. It's my pleasure to welcome Francisco.
Thank you, Zachary, and thank you, friends, for this invitation. For me, it's a real honor to be participating in this continuous session and serve you today as a speaker. I must confess that when Zachary and Melinda called me and invited me to consider this invitation, I felt very challenged, because you know that this topic is not a light one. You know, it is when we said exploring the theological roots of social justice, with that topics we can spend several continuing sessions and write several books if we are up to the task. So I feel honored to be here today to continue this conversation with you, because I know that this is a conversation that among friends we always carry it with us, independently if we recognize it or not. So I was intrigued when they shared with me what was the theme that they wanted to explore. And you can imagine, for many friends, the word theology can be very intimidating. For others, I think they don't want to consider it because they think it is unnecessary to talk about theology within the religious society of friends. And I know that, and I say this as a friend, that when Zachary and Melinda invited me to consider this, I was humbly honored to be invited, and I wanted to hold this invitation with care and in the presence of divine love before answering. And here we are, several months later, trying to faithfully respond to this call. Now, as you may notice, we are in the middle of a current historical conditions that can pull us in several directions as we try to approach this topic. And I know that easily we can try to hide several of the things associated to social justice or to a deep exploration of our own spirituality under the carpet. Because sometimes, and I shared this with some friends several weeks ago, sometimes the simple questions that we are posed that are in front of us are the ones that we want to avoid because they are so sharp and so straight to our heart that we don't want necessarily to confront them with the integrity that they require of us. So let me give you a short anecdote as I start this exploration with you. Several years ago, I was facilitating a contemplative silent retreat here at Pendle Hill. And the way how we started the first day of the retreat was I brought to the group some of the current news that were happening around the globe in regards to violence, war, political discomfort, suffering, yeah. And right there, I have a strong reaction from a friend that stopped me and said, I came here to be in a contemplative retreat, silent retreat, and I wanted to take this as a break to what is going on around the globe. I want to take this as a break from all of these that you are introducing the retreat with. So my immediate reaction was, well, let's enter into a little bit of worship before we continue to explore the why behind this. And we enter into a little bit of worship time. And after 10 minutes or so, I said, friends, I really want to build a framework here and to tell you a little bit about the place that I am coming from. And as a co-facilitator of this silent retreat, contemplative retreat experience, because the main facilitator is the spirit, yeah? But as a co-facilitator, I need to play with the tools that I have been given. And I need to use the gift that I have been given and in order to be faithful to this call. So if I pretend that I will be speaking on a vacuum about what contemplation means without taking a look at the current situation that we are facing in history, I think that I will fail the call of the Spirit within me. And I think that I will fail you as a co-facilitator of that experience. So I share this with you because this experience that I am inviting you to explore today, it is deeply rooted into our existential life. We cannot talk about theology by giving our back to the current situation that we are facing in history. and you will see why. You will see why. So I don't want to make any impressions to you that I will be speaking or approaching this very light topic of the theological roots of social justice from a scholarly perspective. This is not my intention here. I wanted to be clear since the beginning. You won't be hearing me quoting uh, all Quakers or uh, all theologians. I will try to distill this in a very participatory way for us to build this together, to explore this together. And my invitation to you is please be open and accompany one another in this exploration as we try to find meaning, as we try to learn from each other and take a deep look at the intersectionality between theology and justice. My friend Padre Otuma, a poet and theologian that from Ireland that I invited here at Pendle Hill several years ago, has a beautiful short poem that somehow summarizes my intention here. So let me read that short poem to you. The poem is called The Beginning of Wisdom. The beginning of wisdom was when I learned the difference between believing in the truth and telling the truth about belief. I will read it again. The beginning of wisdom was when I learned the difference between believing in the truth and telling the truth about belief. And as we enter this time, I want to invite you to spend some time in small groups. Zachary will help us for that process and share a little bit about some key queries that I want you to explore to make this experience not a Francisco show up, but a friendly approach to this topic as we all construct together and explore together the intersectionality between theology and social justice. So Zachary, when you are ready, you can divide us into a small groups and we can share the query over the chat. I can read the queries to you as to give Zachary some time here. So there are 4 questions. Again, I don't pretend that you will be exploring this question one by one, but accept them as a group of queries and try to make sense of them, to exercise radical listening as you are in the small group by welcoming each one of you, each other with open heart, not trying to fix what other people are sharing with us, but with acceptance, and see what is the wisdom that is within the community. The queries are: what is your understanding or definition of theology? This is the personal approach, yeah? What does this have to do with you? How this relate to the faith and practice of the Religious Society of France? And the last one, how is this related to justice / social justice? Simple queries, simple questions, yeah? I think that if you have 20 minutes to explore that in a small group, you will come out with several books already. So let's see. let's see what we can do together, and we will start from there.
Okay, I'm opening the rooms now. And before I open the rooms, I'm going to put it in, yeah, the queries in the chat. I noticed that Kimani did that. So you've got them. Now I'm opening the rooms. I recommend copying them real quick so you can take them with you into the room just in case they don't follow you. Okay, here we go.
Continue this exploration. Let me instead of trying to reflect back in what the groups has shared in this open space, let me try to deconstruct the title of this talk as we try to explore the topic. Yeah. So the first words that we have in this title is roots. Yeah, roots. And I love, you can find many definitions of roots, but one definition that I really love because how deep and how useful it can be for being used as a spiritual metaphor is in the Oxford Dictionary, when it describes roots as the part of a thing attaching it to a greater or more fundamental whole. Yeah. If we take that definition and play with it, I know that we can say that all of us have already had a very strong experiential encounter with roots, both in its most tangible and practical way, and in the most metaphorical way too. Yeah, you name it. You know, that roots can be faith, ethnicity, language, gender identity, family, wealth. You know, we can take it from there. We can take it from there. Now, when we turn to the term theology, yeah, and Parthenia was right, you know, there are so many ways how we have been trained following a key conceptualization of theology that I think has provoked a lot of damage to us as humanity. So in a more traditional way, theology has been described as the knowledge or discourse about God and all things in relation to God. And I do believe that this concept, as presented, carry a huge gap, and through history have provoked many pain and horrible ways of exercising that, the practice, the spiritual practice behind that concept. Yeah, just to name a few: slavery, discrimination, war, just to name a few. Yeah. Now, I walk away from that conceptualization of theology. This is not the concept that I want to foster or promote within you today, because I do not believe in that concept of theology. The concept of theology that I want us to be on the same page today is more of the classical definition of theology. In Latin, we say fides quaerens intellectum. A modern translation of English will be faith seeking understanding. Faith seeking understanding, or to put that in a more practical way, a continuous search for the fullness of the truth of God. A continuing search for the fullness of the truth of God. Please notice the big difference between these two concepts, or these two understandings. One is talking about the truth about God, yeah? And the second is more focused on the truth of God, yeah? Yeah. I love that Saint Augustine used to write, you know, if you can describe it, it is not God. It's challenge us on this. If you can describe it, my friend, I think that you are talking about something else. But you know, the experience of the divine is so complex and so large and so challenging that trying to define us in our way and put them into systemic thinking, not necessarily provide us with a good departing point. That doesn't mean that trying to understand it and trying to discern what is the call that the divine one within us to explore is not a valuable process. So the first approach, and I think that this is in partnership with what Partinia was saying to us. The first approach is a narrow approach that fosters division, you know, and that approach sadly has been practiced over centuries and has been the backbone of many oppressions, many structures that has been perpetuated until today. The second approach, the second definition is a more open one. Is an invitation to diversity and fellowship, is an invitation to be implicated within the exploration of the divine. It is that type of approach that I would like us to explore, and I want to welcome you in developing it as we try to put this in context with the idea of justice or the practice of justice. So in a more technical words, if I want to use some of them, some of the language used by theologians, you know, the theological framework that made possible conviviality is the one that is a real meaningful concept as we aspire to the beloved community. Yeah, we friends are constantly exercising a theological practice as we discern with integrity the movement of the Spirit within us. We don't call it that way, and Pamela Haynes was saying, you know, she doesn't feel comfortable with the word theology because we know, you know, bad theology over centuries have killed so many people, and he is still doing that today. You know, when you hear a patriarch in Russia today calling, you know, that the LGBTQ community is part of of the the scene that has to be eradicated from the a sector of the world, because they perceive in their conceptualization of theology that this is a corruption, yeah, to the spirituality that they would like to live. That I will invite that person examine what is the idea of God and through history, because every single religion and I know that just the word God for in many circles can be a disturbing one, as theology is too. So, but I will invite that person to really experiment and explore through history when is that humanity has been finding the best of itself. It hasn't been when we are exercising exclusion or discrimination against each other. The best of time that we have experiment a true encounter with the divine is when we are able to open ourselves and to challenge ourselves with situations that are not necessarily similar as we are, with situations that are inviting us to explore if and to materialize that peace can be possible, for example, that common understanding can be possible, that working together in community, despite of all the challenges that we face, can be possible. And this is the type of theological approach that I want to work with as we look into this, because at the end of the day, we are trying to respond again faithfully to the call of the Spirit that is moving within us, and that within is a tricky one, because we Franks trying to always put the word within just as if there is this internal process, and the word within in this case imply both. Implies my inward work, my inward exploration of the divine, at the same time that my outward action, in order to show that I in my life is trying to be a faithful to the call that the Spirit is raising within me. So the inward and the outward are in a constant dynamic exploration and dance that we may not avoid, and I know that we invest a lot of energy in dividing them. We invest a lot of energy in exploring the internal and personal exploration from the external and more communal exploration that we have to accompany one another as we dance with the divine. In other words, what I am trying to convey here is that theology, my friends, is simply the expression and development of a spirituality, a fundamental intuition that serves to guide the spiritual life, a fundamental intuition that support us in our own spiritual journey as person, as in community. And that provide us the space for curiosity and at the same time for being in a covenant to that spiritual journey as we try to work and walk this path together. Now, when I refer to spirituality, I want to go to its radical root, the radical meaning of spirituality. And this is another misconception that we sometimes find I will speak for myself. I sometimes find myself in this conundrum of what is spirituality for me? Is spirituality for me to imitate certain figure, or is to follow certain figure in a way that I can be faithful to the mission that they were trying to work toward, or to the personality? I think it's the first one, you know. Instead of imitation, we are trying to a true spirituality is, at least within the Christian context, spirituality is not an imitation, but a following. In the particular Christian context, a following of Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah. And we know what happened with that particular person in history. Yeah. So to bring this a little bit closer to our time in history, if I want to exercise a very sincere exploration of my spirituality, following, for example, the example of Luther King, the example of, I have Romero here in my back, a bishop from El Salvador that 42 years ago was killed, March 24, 1980. Those figures are example, but they are not to be imitated. They invite us to follow the mission that they were working toward. Yeah. And in those two particular scenarios, I can say that the mission that they were working towards was justice, because justice is not a new concept for us. If you take the Hebrew Bible, if you take the New Testament too, you will find that that is over the place, over and over and over and over. And at the same time, if you see organized religion, not just within Christianity, but beyond Christianity, always the tension has been between how easy are we opening ourselves to be truthful to justice or not? How are we embracing with everything that it takes the road to justice in our life as individuals and as communities? Yeah. So in this sense, I want to say that theology is not the first step. Theology is a second step in the process of spiritual development. The first step, I think, is a true commitment to service, to community, to love. Yeah, we are constantly called to doing theology from a new perspective, as an examination of our faith and practice. And we do that very often. You know, we friends has our queries. Our queries are an invitation to revisit our how we are doing, to examine ourselves and see, you know, how easy are we getting comfortable with the situation around us and being blind or deaf to them. Yeah. And the challenge that we have is that, you know, for people that read the Bible, I said, you know, a great spiritual practice is if you read the Bible and the newspaper together, because we need to put things into context. We need to put things in context. Theology must not only know what to do with God, but theology must know what to do with God's people too. You know, putting God in a vacuum from a distance won't serve us well. It never has served us well, and it won't serve us well. So the friend belief that the divine is present in every single one of us is one of the fundamental theological elements that we, and one of the most beautiful ones that we hold. And when I say this, I don't think that we necessarily had a cope with the meaning, the deep meaning of what this imply of us, because we can be very celebratory about our little accomplishment when we feel good, about the things that we are doing to bring justice close to reality. As Pamela was quoting Dr. King when he said that the arc of history bent to justice. I do believe that, but how are we trying in our current situation, in the life that I have been given, in the experiences that I have been invited to, how I am contributing for that art to bench to justice in every single occasion. I think that this is a query that we must carry with us all the time. Because religion held with deep conviction can lead to political involvement and tends to create a conflict, especially in situations where the cry for social justice is so loud. Let me invite you to explore these concepts of social justice from a different perspective too, because that for many religious leaders, and again, this is beyond Christianity, this is beyond Quakerism, this is beyond you name it. They believe that social justice sometimes is a distraction from the relationship that they or that we must have with the divine. If you just Google several key religious leaders within the US that believe on this type of approach, you will find a couple hundred, a couple hundred people that publicly have asserted that social justice is a distraction for us to get into our deep relationship with the divine. And I never has experienced a lie so vividly when I have heard that, because it is far from truth. This is when we witness, as the popular phrase says, again, that bad theology kills people. Many others also consider that social justice is just a tool for demagogical discourses. I don't need to remind you how this has been playing in the recent history of the United States, because it's in front of us. It's in front of us. People within a very important group of social thinkers believe that social justice is an insult to reason, and they have called it a mere act of poor journalism. Can you imagine? Can you imagine listening to this when you just walk on the street and you find the need, the heart, the loud cry that social justice is giving us? we may be surprised how this is embedded into our current time. You know, just to give you an example, look at how we deal with the ongoing global pandemic. Who has access fair hands to vaccination? Who has access fair hands to truth information about what was going on? Which people were left behind? And until today, 2 years later, after we learn of this, you know, we know. It, we can take a look at how we have addressed the homeless situation in many of our cities. Thousands of people. How we have maintained inequality and support system that perpetuate those inequality among ourselves. You know, the unfair distribution of resources in schools in Pennsylvania, for example, is just an example of this. And yet, we may not call it social justice because I don't know, sometimes I think that we are afraid of touching this type of thing. There is a great pool of topics that are in front of us, challenging us, asking of us, what is the theological approach? How is that we are living our faith into the practice of making love possible when we are confronting this type of situation? One of the best, when I was preparing these little remarks for you, one of the best theological discourse that I have here over the past years was Senator Cory Booker addressing Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Yeah. And you will say, wait a minute, Francisco, theology? And I will say, yes, theology. Because theology is a call for us to embrace our history. Theology is not finding God necessarily in an encyclopedia. Theology is how we are faithful to the call of making humanity better. Theology is an invitation for us to faithfully embrace our current reality and co-create with the divine the space for making a world a more healthy, embracing justice to the fullness without shortcut, you know, without sugarcoating it, embracing it to the fullness. So from a sincere theological perspective, there is no room for justification of work, for example. And work this is another one that is in front of us. We know that there are a school of thought that firmly believe that injustice is more than necessary for us to exist. This is not new. There are people that believe that for us to exist as humanity, we must perpetuate certain inequality. And this is an aberration on faith. Yeah, because we know that those people don't want to name this way of thinking theology, but in practice, this is one of the things that describe their core belief and the idolatry that they are serving by creating this division among us. We are facing in this current moment in history, the war in Ukraine, for example. And I don't know you, but I feel that this conflict situation is a slap in our face, not only because there is no justice in war, period. there is no justice in war. This is the fundamental truth about this. Any war can be justified. Any killing can be justified. Any exercise of violence can be deeply justified as a act of faithfulness, faithfully following God's call. And everything that has happened in history in that category, we know that has been wrong, has been wrong. It doesn't matter how they wanted to present it to us. But this particular scenario is a slap on our face, because it also is showing us how we exercise discrimination and ignore similar situation of occupation and violence in other places around the globe. We must take that into our prayer. We must challenge ourselves and ask those deep questions. Why this is happening? Why I hear more about these and not the others? Why are we called to act more proactively on this type of conflict while ignoring the others? I think that this is a call of theology. I think that this is a call of spirituality. I think that this has to be in connection with how faithfully are we trying to respond to the work of the divine within us. Engaging in making the world a better place is a mystical call. And I know when I say the word mystical, for many friends, it's like, what? Mystical? And I say, yes, mystical. It's a mystical force in which faith is an active service to history and to the recreation of humanity. Is within this context that I ask myself, and I ask you, what is our life proclaiming about the truth of God? What are we proclaiming about the truth of God? Especially when we are called the Religious Society of Friends of the Truth. Yeah. What our life is saying about that truth. And if there is any condition for discrimination, any situation of injustice within it, we must address it, because being faithful to the truth is being faithful to justice. Let me go to the Christian background here. Yeah, the Gospel of Luke is defined in many Christian settings as the Gospel of joy, and I will say, and the Gospel of justice. Since the first chapter, the word justice is just right there. You can find that in the Song of Mary. You can find that in the Song of Zachary. You can find that in Jesus' proclamation when opening a roll in the temple and he started talking about the mission, reading Isaiah and having the courage to say, and today this is being accomplished. I said, what? So just to mention this, within our own experience as friends and within our own history, I think that we can find so many testimonies of people that has embraced justice as a true response to their call as being friends, as being follower, and no mere imitation, of a mission. And I have to say that, again, the best things that I know is within the Christian context. very early on within the initial Christian community, and we love when we read, oh, they share everything, they make a decision by consensus and so on, because we believe that we created that. But look at the initial Christian community, and you will find out that these are practice that has been with us for a long time, and beyond them, beyond them. But within the first initial Christian movement, our friend Paul, some people hate Paul, some people not necessarily invite Paul very often, but I found that Paul has been misinterpreted. Paul was very clear that truth was very often hijacked by the many injustice being practiced within his own society and within the newborn Christian community. Within France, we can find testimony in Margaret Fell, Benjamin Lay, John Woolman. I think that they somehow are bitter stars right there for us to say, hey, this is possible. Yeah, we can do this as monthly meeting, as yearly meeting. We can do this as person of faith, where among those people, they live with integrity the dynamic between theology and social justice. I can say that the best theology, searching for the fullness of the truth of God, is one that is articulated in our own work toward justice. I cannot say to you that working or trying to understand the call of God within ourselves by abandoning the call for work toward making justice possible in our current time is a true theology. If I say that to you, I will be lying to you. And again, I will try to be working with you and walking with you the path for searching the meaning of what is to be a friend, and searching the meaning to welcoming the Spirit to work with us, not to talk about the knowledge about God, but to try to understand God in the day-to-day work toward making this world a better place. And with that, my friend, I see that we have a couple minutes here that I would like to invite for some question, if there is any. I see that Ann Hill has a question.
I very much appreciate your connection by speaking with us. What is your theological background?
You know that I am originally from the Dominican Republic, and I would say my theological background were the communities where I was deeply involved. You know, for me, the experience of the divine was heavily portrayed and experienced in the experience of the struggle that my community was going through. So working together to clean the street, working together to make sure that people has access to clean water, that people had a opportunity to better education, was not just a task of accomplishment, certain development stage. It was a task in response to the spiritual call that community was willing to embrace. So I do believe that my theology view started right there. And later I had the opportunity to be, invited to a more formal training on in a academic setting to explore theology. So I read and work on several things, exploring some of the thinkers that were, nurturing my own exploration this way. Yeah, but if I need to summarize this, I think that being in community has been my my roots of the theological background, of my theological background.
Thank you.
Thanks. Molly, I think that you have.
Yes, thank you, Francisco. I think you may have partially just answered my question with the mention of community, but with such diversity in theological backgrounds among friends, and even from the discussion we've heard today, sometimes I feel discouraged that our theologies individually may be too different from one another, and that honoring the light of God or Christ or Spirit within each of us and our testimonies, although those are wonderful guides, sometimes feel watered down. And I have a concern about that. So I feel like community may be part of the answer, but I wonder if you have any guidance for us about that. Because sometimes I long for like a clearer theology that's defined by someone else, even though I don't think that's the answer for me. But sometimes I wish there was more unity in what we believe.
Yeah.
So I'm just grappling with that. Thank you.
This is a great question, and I will say, we spend some time here trying to distinguish what is theology and what is not theology. I think that we friends, when we talk about our differences, in certain way of embracing or addressing certain issue among us, we call it that our theology differentiation, and I think that it is not. I think that yes, they are differentiation, but they are not theology, because again, if theology is the incarnation of spirituality, and the fundamental belief within our experience as being friends is that the divine is manifested in every single one of us. Every single one of us. That right there, invite and challenge us to be exercising acceptance to the fullness. As a friend of color, when I go to when I have been in many friends community, I didn't find a lot of people that look like me. But I don't necessarily depart from that, for example, to not embrace the challenge of being present there, because I do believe that representation matters, but at the same time to challenge those community and say, hey, we have and we share a fundamental belief here. How are we making that obvious and possible for everybody to see our differences and work beyond those differences? Not because I want to be in a place where the monthly meeting or the community is trying to accommodate me as a exotic human being, but no. Because I want us to really embrace that of God in everyone is a true call to recognize the otherness and to embrace that as the spirituality that we must exercise in every single moment. not just when we are talking about social justice, in every single moment. Yeah. To give you an example, you know, it is challenging for many friends sometimes that don't look as the majority within certain community to speak. How are we making possible that they find their place within our community? And when I say this, you know, I am saying this with integrity, with sincerity, you know, because I have a role to play there too. I have a role to play there too. So recognizing the otherness within us, recognizing our differences, not necessarily the fundamental theological belief, because I think that is very strong within friends, but how are we practicing and putting that fundamental belief in place? This is what I said, you know, how are we proclaiming today our faith to be truthful? I know myself that I have a lot of challenge with that. But, you know, every single day I must examine what is that I would do better today, Francisco? What is that we can do better as monthly meeting, as friends organization and institution? I think that the task is in front of us. And we must embrace it because, you know, at the end of the day, justice will be the final word. The final word in history won't be all the craziness that we have been seeing. The final word in history has been we don't have anything else but to be in a road to justice. Yeah, because when we do that, we are being truly faithful to the divine within us.
Francisco, we've come to the end of our time. So if this could be the last question, that'd be great.
That's good.
This is not a question, it's just an appreciation of the query that I want to take with me. What is my life proclaiming about the truth of God? And the reason that means so much to me, it acknowledges that my life is proclaiming all the time. You know, it recognizes that. So what is it proclaiming about the truth of God is really, I think this is a very meaningful query for each of us in our communities.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to close just by saying, you know, we have been using language that is very anthropological centered. Yeah, we have been talking about humanity, and a friend, Sandra Boone, raised the issue. Like when I say humanity, a better word will be creation. But you know, sometimes when you say creation, that also sends people off the discussion. But yes, our justice is not just to create a better humanity. I said to create a better world. And that means paying attention to nature. That means paying attention to how we are dealing with everything that we have. How are we inviting fairness? How are we inviting welcoming? How are we inviting, again, the recreation of hope and community within that? And see, you know, that the beloved community is possible, and that the beloved community start with me. Yeah. So thank you, Frank, for your patience and for your prayer and support today. again, I hope that these remarks are an invitation for you to continue exploring this in a personal and communal way. And I thank you, my friends within the yearly meetings, for considering me and inviting me to share with you this.
Thank you so much, Francisco. This has been deeply meaningful to me, and I think for all of us. My gratitude runs deep.